Hi, and welcome to a Sense of Wellness podcast, inspiring and empowering a healthier you. I'm your host, Susan Greeley, and I'll be diving deeper into the 4 pillars of wellness: sleep, exercise, nutrition, and stress management. In today's episode for National Nutrition Month, I will be talking about nutrition and lifestyle in relation to a silent and very prevalent chronic disease, osteoporosis. I will also be talking about how all 4 wellness pillars impact our bone health and are tied to the prevention of fractures as well as reversing this chronic disease. So I'm very, very happy to introduce my guest today, Dr. John Neustadt, who is an international doctor, researcher, and integrative medical expert. He has published more than 100 medical articles and written 4 health and wellness books. I really want to focus on his latest book, however, which is Fracture Proof Your Bones, a comprehensive guide to osteoporosis. Dr. Neustadt is a highly sought after speaker at medical conferences, and he was recognized as one of the top 10 cited authors in the world for his work. So, John, Dr. Neustadt, I am so happy to have you with me today. Welcome. It's great to have you.
Thank you. And please call me John.
Okay. Thanks, John. Excellent. So this is such an important conversation we're about to have. And I want to thank you again. You have built a reputation for yourself around offering people, meaning patients, simple, creative, and integrative solutions to complex health problems, right? Like you're known for that. So I'm honored to have you with me today to talk about this very important aspect of our health and well-being, our overall bone health, and this chronic condition, osteoporosis. You know, I'm in this space of nutrition and health and wellness and medicine, and we don't talk about it enough. So thank you for being here. And I'd love to hear how you ended up in this area specifically.
20 years ago, I never saw myself specializing in osteoporosis and bone health. But what happened is when I got into clinical practice, as what happens so often, our patients are our best teachers. And I had patients coming to me with osteoporosis, and I thought I was doing a great job. Their bone density was going up. My mother-in-law has osteoporosis, and she did at the time. And she was working with her conventional physician. She was taking Fosamax. I was giving her some recommendations nutritionally to help her, and her bone density was going up. So everybody was happy. And then she tripped on a throw rug in her house and broke her hip. And I thought to myself, what is wrong with this picture? Something is not right, because by the objective measure that is most commonly tracked in people, that is that bone mineral density test, she was doing great. She should not have broken a bone. It was a simple fall. She didn't even land that hard. And so I dove into the research and I started looking at osteoporosis and the bone density testing. And it shocked me when I learned that we've known since the 1990s that the bone density test predicts less than half of people who will break a bone. And in 2008, that was quantified even further, so that now we know that for a woman with osteoporosis, a bone density test only predicts 44% of them who will fracture. And for men, it's only 21% fracture prediction. In fact, medical associations that have looked at the research have correctly concluded that fracture risk depends on factors largely other than a bone density. And yet back then, and even still, doctors and patients are almost myopically or exclusively focused on just changing that number on the test instead of treating the patient sitting in front of them. So I kept reading and researching and looking at all of the factors that go into maintaining bone strength, growing stronger bones, even as we're getting older, reducing fracture risk. And I've developed not just my book based on all of that research, but as you mentioned, lecturing at medical conferences, and also developed some products that didn't exist that I needed to help my patients with this issue.
Mm-hmm. I love that holistic approach, John. It's so important to focus on these lifestyle factors. And that's why I was so excited to talk to you today, because this isn't discussed enough. I think so many women in particular, because we know it's primarily seen in women, osteoporosis, but not that men are unaffected. I want you to talk a little bit about the numbers, but we don't focus on the balance, building strength. You know, people are falling, and how do you prevent the falls and the fractures is really the conversation I wanted to have with you, and talking about diet and nutrition and exercise and supplements and this very holistic and all encompassing approach to it rather than that, as you said, that very myopic view of that DEXA scan. So let's focus on some of those numbers, please, John. Give us an overview of what osteoporosis looks like and osteopenia in this country.
Well, it's really starting to reach, and it will reach epidemic proportions because it is a condition that primarily affects people as we age. And the United States and globally, actually, the population is aging. In fact, now I believe there are more people over the age of 65 on this planet than there are younger than 5. And it is primarily, as you correctly pointed out, a condition that affects women. About 80% of osteoporosis cases are in women, about 20% in men. And that's because when a woman goes through menopause and her estrogen drops, that's for that period of time and for the 10 years after is the fastest rate of bone loss in women because estrogen is anabolic. It's also anti-inflammatory. And that estrogen helps build and maintain healthy bones. So as we get older too, there are other assaults that could impact bone health with age. A few of those, just to mention them, are medications. A growing number of people are on medications. And as we get older, it's more likely that people are on not just one medication, but 3, 5, 7 or more medications. And there is a long list of medications, commonly prescribed medications that damage bone, increase osteoporosis risk, and increase fracture risk. And it's really fractures that's the bottom line. And that's the most important question to ask. What is my fracture risk? Or if somebody's recommending something to you, how well does it reduce my fracture risk? Not just change that number on a test, for example, the bone density test. And I'll give you a few staggering, shocking statistics to drive this point home that really we need to focus on fractures. So a woman's risk of an osteoporosis fracture is equal to her combined risk of breast, uterine, and ovarian cancer. And osteoporosis fractures account for more days spent in hospital than other diseases like heart attacks, diabetes, and breast cancer. If you're a woman 65 years or older and you fracture a hip, there's up to a 36% chance that you're going to be dead within a year. And if you do survive, half of those people who survive never regain their pre-fracture pain-free level of mobility and enjoyment of life that they used to have. And in fact, a significant number of those, about 20 to 30%, never fully regain what's called their activities of daily living, which means being able to independently dress themselves, go to the bathroom, shower themselves, go to the supermarket, those sorts of things, and continue to need help. And so it is an incredibly serious situation. And fortunately, though, there's a lot that we can do. There is a lot you can do, not just to stop the deterioration, but because our bodies are these living, dynamic, amazing organisms, when we create the right environment for our bodies to grow healthier bones, they usually do and can.
They sure do. Thank you for all those numbers. I actually pulled some of that out of your book and wanted to highlight that just to set the stage and to make people very aware of what we're talking about, what we're dealing with. And because we talk so much about cancer and heart disease, and, heart disease is the number one killer, but that is staggering that people spend more time in the hospital because of osteoporosis than any of those cardiovascular diseases.
Well, and also in terms of cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis globally is second only to cardiovascular disease as a health issue. And every 30 seconds, someone in the world is fracturing a bone because of osteoporosis. That's how common it is.
I was about to say that. So if you hadn't, I wanted to. I haven't read your whole book, but that really jumped out at me. So repeat, every 30 seconds, someone with osteoporosis breaks a bone. So that's why we're here. And you stated a very positive thing, which is what I like to impart on people, is that, we're here to inspire and empower, John, that there are many things you can do in your daily life to prevent the fractures. So even if you have a very strong family history, or that you already have osteopenia or osteoporosis, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I have to say this, there are things you can do to still reverse it. And I think that that's the most empowering thing that we can do, is help people get there.
You're absolutely right. And just a quick, comment on the family history point. Yes, it is a risk factor for osteoporosis. Did your mother have osteoporosis? Well, that automatically puts you in a higher risk category. And I sometimes hear doctors and patients and people in the general public say, well, it's just genetic. To me, that's a cop-out because there is no physician, no researcher in the world that can tell you which genes are responsible for that. There's ongoing research in this area, and there are dozens and dozens of genes that impact bone health. But what we do know that you do inherit for your parents, which is a bigger determinant of chronic diseases as we age, not just osteoporosis, but heart disease, dementia risk, and other chronic diseases. What people typically do inherit from their parents is their diet and their lifestyle.
And habits. That is such a key point. Exactly. So let's talk about diet. That'll segue into diet. I mentioned that all 4 wellness pillars are involved in our bone health through a lifetime. And we are this organism that is constantly turning over. So we do turn over bone as we age. And I think people don't know that. So what, from a nutrition standpoint, I love to talk about this and educate people on it. What are the most important nutrients for our bone health throughout life, and particularly after menopause for women?
I think it's pretty much the same. I mean, the amounts may differ, but the body needs all of the nutrients that are required for its biochemistry to function properly. And we know that in the research has shown that deficiencies in magnesium, deficiencies in zinc and copper and other minerals is associated with osteoporosis. And the best place to get those are in food. Vitamin K is an important vitamin for bone health. And there are associations with dietary vitamin K, which is vitamin K1, meaning the more green leafy vegetables you eat, that's where it's found. That lowers the risk of osteoporosis and fractures. So understanding that plant forward diet, eating lots of whole foods, is associated with better outcomes with reduced osteoporosis risk, better bone health, reduced fracture risk is important. But it's not that people should eat a vegan or vegetarian diet. There have been studies that looked at omnivore diets versus vegan, vegetarian, and it's the omnivore diet, eating some animal proteins, that in most studies is superior to vegan and vegetarian diets when it comes to bone health and osteoporosis. Now, that said, there is some speculation in the research that with those vegan and vegetarian diets, not all of the studies showed an increased risk for osteoporosis. And it's thought that in the studies where those diets were okay for osteoporosis risk, they did not increase the risk, is in the studies where people were getting enough protein. And it's the amount of protein in those diets that seems to be deficient and the key missing piece. And in fact, as we get older, the amount of protein we need to maintain healthy bones and muscle increases. If you're just getting the minimum recommended by the government, the USRDA, that's insufficient as we get older to maintain healthy bone and muscles. In fact, a European agency came out a couple of years ago with their position statement and concluded that the amount of protein somebody eats, even within the normal range, can account for 2 to 4% of bone minerals, because their bone is more than just minerals. It's more than just calcium and magnesium and other minerals. There are about 200 proteins in bone. Protein is a dynamic tissue. It does lots of things. It's not just structural, but, protecting your internal organs, helping you to move, jump, hug your loved ones, be mobile, drive your car, all those wonderful things. But it also produces our red blood cells, our white blood cells for our immune system, and our platelets. And so it requires for all of that lots of proteins. And the structural protein that is thought to provide the most strength to bone is bone collagen, type 1 collagen. And that's created from the raw materials. If you're eating enough protein, your body can produce that healthy amount of collagen. And in fact, if you were to take your bones and remove all of the collagen from it, and it was just a column of minerals, it would be brittle like chalk. For those of you of my age, at least, who had chalk growing up. And if you demineralize the bone, you can take a chicken bone. I've actually done this, and you soak it in vinegar, and it'll strip all the minerals out. And what's left is the collagen, the protein matrix. And it's like a rubber chicken bone. You can bend it, break it, stomp on it, hit it on a table. It will not break at all. So that's kind of the two major components of bone, the protein and the minerals, and then that we want to focus on. And you can get those through diet. You can supplement with dietary supplements when necessary, because, for example, it can be challenging for people to get enough protein in their diet. The adequate amount of protein, if you take your body weight in pounds and multiply it by 0.6, that will give you the minimum or the approximate amount of protein you should be targeting to get every day. For me, that's 90 grams of protein. That's a lot. I can't get that every day through diet alone. And I'm a big proponent of using dietary supplements as the FDA intends, which is as a supplement to a healthy diet. Diet is always first. The supplements are there to bridge the gap. And so I do protein supplement to help bridge that gap and get me to where I need to go for my target nutrition.
I completely agree. Filling in the gaps is where dietary supplements come in, and we can focus on diet first. In my, not just opinion, experience and profession, diet is first. Like, that's our first course of intervention, first course of, health and the foundation. So what jumped out at me as you're talking about that overall, that global look at bone health and nutrition, you didn't even bring up calcium or vitamin D. And I'm really happy that you didn't, because there's a lot of just simple views of bone health, and people think that that's the end all be all, is getting enough calcium in your diet, and they don't have to think beyond that. And that's a very big misconception. So talking about protein, number one, when it comes to our macros, and I see this in so many people's diets, I work with a lot of people that don't get adequate protein daily. And as we age, and those recommendations are changing, John, and just that whole concept of collagen, there's all these collagen supplements out there now, yet people aren't looking at their diet and getting the precursors for it, the building blocks of collagen, protein, and getting adequate vitamin C. So those are things that I'd love to bring up in this conversation too. Having people assess their own diets. Are they getting enough protein, first of all, and then look at the minerals and the micronutrients, right? Are you getting adequate vitamin C and zinc and vitamin K, and not just the calcium and D? So I would actually like for you to speak to supplements a bit more. You mentioned a very important thing, that they are meant to bridge gaps in our diet. And a lot of us do have gaps in the diet. So what types of supplements are really important to help either prevent, reverse, manage, all of that?
Great question. Before I jump into that, I do just want to sort of tie up this dietary pattern discussion into a neat little bow. And that is, it's not about focusing on just one individual food. Yes, quantifying certain things, maybe your protein requirement is important, but it's about your overall dietary pattern. Mm-hmm. And overwhelmingly, the research supports the Mediterranean dietary pattern for bone health, and also for other chronic diseases as well. Specifically for bone health, people who adhere more strictly to the Mediterranean dietary pattern, there are tons of resources on the internet you can find on my website as well. People who adhere to that more closely have a 20% reduced risk of osteoporosis, but more importantly, a 21% reduced risk of hip fractures. And it's not just about the food, it's also the oils you eat. Olive oil is considered one of the protective factors. So it's about your overall dietary pattern, because one of the challenges that I find with people is sometimes they get so mired in the details and concerned about monitoring every little detail. And I like to just pull people back and reduce that stress and say, don't worry so much about that. Let's look at the overall pattern. Maybe we quantify a couple things, but it's about, again, the overall pattern. Mm-hmm. With respect to dietary supplements, I just want to mention, because you did mention, prevention. Dietary supplements are not approved by the FDA to diagnose, cure, prevent, or treat any disease. So I just want to say that they're very powerful components of health with respect to pushing your biochemical pathways in the direction of health and promoting your health. And there are excellent clinical trials on many nutrients that are shown to do that. So let's start with calcium. You mentioned calcium and vitamin D. So let's just start with that, because everybody thinks about, calcium and vitamin D when they think about bone health and osteoporosis. The USRDA for calcium for women is 1,200 milligrams per day. It's 1,000 milligrams per day per men. Now, there's no research showing that getting more than 1,200 milligrams per day is better for bones. Unfortunately, I'm still getting patients coming to me telling me that their physician told them to take 1,000 milligrams or 1,200 or even 1,400 milligrams of calcium as a dietary supplement. And that is absolutely the wrong recommendation, because the USRDA for any nutrient means the total amount you're consuming. That's from diet and dietary supplements. The average American woman consumes about 800 milligrams of calcium in her diet. So just to bridge that gap, to get a little extra support for many women, just taking an extra 400 milligrams per day is all you need to get you into that 1,200 milligram range. Definitely not 1,000 milligrams. For the average American man, they consume about 1,000 milligrams of calcium per day in their diet. Like, it doesn't have to be from dairy. They're excellent non-dairy sources of calcium as well. So just be aware of that. Almonds are a great source. Sardines are a great source. There are many sources of non-dairy calcium out there. Now, there's a safety issue with calcium that's beginning to emerge, and it's important to understand that just because it's a nutrient doesn't mean it's safe in all doses. The Bone Health and Osteoporosis Foundation and the American Foundation or College for Preventive Cardiology, their current position statement is that calcium is safe up to the tolerable limit set by the National Academies of Medicine, which is 2,000 to 2,500 milligrams per day total. Right. So if you're taking 1,400 milligrams or 1,200 milligrams of calcium as a dietary supplement, plus you're getting calcium in your diet, you're getting into that potentially toxic range where you could have problems. So I'd like to educate people about that and have most people need to decrease the amount of calcium they're taking as a dietary supplement, not increase it, because unfortunately still the general recommendations by most sources out there are too high. Mm-hmm. When it comes to vitamin D, I'm a fan of testing for vitamin D levels. It's a simple blood test. You can even buy them now direct to consumer, where it's a finger prick test you can do at your house and mail it in. But the research has shown that for reducing fall risk, and 95% of fractures occurs because somebody falls, for fall risk reduction and hip fracture reduction, that you want your vitamin D level to be in the range of about 30 to 44 nanograms per milliliter. That's in the US. And Canada and elsewhere, they have a different number of units into nanomoles. But for the US, 30 to 44 is the result that you want. And that's just for bone health. And you can get there typically, most people will get there by taking about 2,000 IUs of supplemental vitamin D a day. For higher doses, for higher amounts in your blood, 50 to 60, many clinicians are recommending that now for immune benefits, beyond just the health benefits of vitamin D. But vitamin D is very safe even in higher blood levels than that for most people. So that's calcium and vitamin D. It goes back, how I look at these individual nutrients when it comes to dietary supplements. And if you look at bone health dietary supplements out there, you look at the nutrients that are in them, there can be a long list of vitamins and minerals. And I ask a very simple question, and this is how I evaluate them. Which nutrients have been shown in clinical trials, not only to promote healthy bone density, but more importantly, to maintain strong bones as indicated by fewer fractures in clinical trials? There are only 4 nutrients that meet that criteria: calcium and vitamin D, a specific form of vitamin K2 called MK4, and a mineral called strontium. And I'm not a fan of using strontium, and I'm happy to address why in a couple of minutes.
Okay.
But first with MK4. Vitamin K2, MK4 is a form of vitamin K2, and vitamin K2 is a category of molecules. So if you see it out there somewhere, it says vitamin K2, it's important to ask, well, which type of vitamin K2, which form of vitamin K2? In dietary supplements, there are typically 2 forms of vitamin K2 that are found, MK7 and MK4. Now, these are different molecules. Yes, they're both types of vitamin K2, but what we know in biology and biochemistry is that if you change one carbon atom, you can get overlapping impacts and effects on the body, but you also get different effects on the body. They're not the same molecule. And we see that in the clinical trials and basic research. They have different effects. With respect to bone, MK7 has never been shown to improve bone density. In clinical trials, it's only been shown to reduce how fast somebody loses bone density. But more importantly, with the MK7, there are no clinical trials showing that it maintains bone strength as indicated by fewer fractures. There are no clinical trials that looked at fractures as the endpoint in studies that used MK7. In contrast, MK4 has been shown both to stabilize and improve bone density in postmenopausal osteoporosis, but also in people taking medications that damage bone like prednisone and leuprolide. But more importantly, it's been shown to maintain bone strength as indicated by over 70% fewer fractures in clinical trials. There are over 25 human clinical trials on MK4. It's been so well studied that it's been approved by the Ministry of Health in Japan for bone health since 1995. And there have been multiple meta-analyses. With a meta-analysis for your listeners or, studies, researchers will go and aggregate the data, take the data from different studies and combine them to confirm the earlier studies and make sure that the trends and the results they're seeing are accurate. And it's been confirmed in multiple meta-analyses as well that MK4 not just promotes healthy bone density, but maintains strong bones as indicated by fewer fractures. But not only that, MK4 has been shown in clinical trials and in basic research to have anti-cancer benefits that the MK7 doesn't have. They're up to phase 2 clinical trials in people with acute myeloid leukemia, myeloid dysplastic syndrome, which are 2 blood cancers, liver cancer, and 1 case report of acute promyelocytic leukemia, showing that MK4 can promote healthy cell division, healthy blood cell production in people with those conditions without having any of the toxicity associated with the chemotherapeutic drugs. Now, again, it's not a medication. It's been used to help promote health in these patients and in these populations. But my point is MK4 and MK7 have different activities in the body, and MK7 has not been shown to have any of those benefits that the MK4 has been shown to have repeatedly.
That was excellent. I think it's so helpful to have listeners, if they may be taking a supplement for their bone health specifically, to take a look at them and know what's in them. And when they see that, I think it's overwhelming to people, or they just, make assumptions. I was told to take this. So thank you for that very in-depth assessment of what to take as far as your vitamin K supplement, very specifically. And we're talking here about preventing the fractures and maintaining that bone health for the long haul is what I say. So we need to look at longevity. We're living longer. We have an aging population. I mean, that was so much great information that was a beautiful bow that you put on the nutrition part.
Thank you. And with the MK4, just to be clear, it's in the dose of 45 milligrams per day. That's what the clinical trials support, 45 milligrams per day of the MK4.
Very specific. Excellent. People need that, the specific recommendations. So as far as, these lifestyle factors that we're talking about, and I could really continue on diet and talk about things in general that we do that are sort of detrimental over time for our health, meaning being obese, smoking, alcohol, high sugar, high ultra processed foods. I just want to put that out there. But I also want to take the time to talk about, I mentioned balance and strength training. And we know that strength training, I'd say everybody knows that strength training is good for our bones, especially as we age. How important is it? Are there certain types of exercise, John, in conjunction with those nutrients? So give us the lowdown on strength training and osteoporosis, please.
It's crucial. You need to have healthy muscles, strong muscles, healthy nervous system for balance, and strength training improves both of those. Again, the goal here is to reduce the risk of falling and fall-related injuries, including fractures. So I like to tell people when they ask me, what's the best type of exercise to do? The best type of exercise to do is the exercise that you're going to do. Because if we tell people to go do a specific type of exercise and they're resistant or they really don't want to do it, that's not helpful, because this is a condition that took years and years and decades probably to develop. it takes time as well and consistent activity to reduce your risks. And so what you want to do is find something that's consistent, and it can change over time. It doesn't have to be the same thing. If you like going into a gym and lifting weights, fantastic, do that. But make sure you're doing it safely. Make sure you're doing it. You're working with a trainer who understands that if you have advanced osteoporosis, you're at an increased risk for fractures. And there are some movements and some exercises that you probably want to avoid. So go in and do it safely, and do it in a very, what I call a graduated progression. Like, don't worry about increasing the amount of weights or the amount of activity quickly. You're not 20 years old anymore, but it's slow and consistent. It's the old parable of the tortoise and the hare. You know, who won that race? It wasn't the hare that came out of the gate and ran the fastest. The hare got tired and took a nap. And that's what happens to people. They get burnt out. It's that consistent, every day plodding along. That's what's going to get you to win this race. So yes, you can go into a gym. You can lift weights if you want. I don't particularly enjoy that. There are other things that I used to, but not anymore. Your body can be used as resistance exercise. So resistance exercise just means moving against weight. So your body weight, however much you are, every time you go up a step, you're technically doing resistance exercise. So take the stairs instead of an elevator. Walking is fantastic. You know, park a few steps, a few rows further away from the door of the store. Anything you can do to get more steps in. The research has shown that if you walk an average of 7,000 to 7,500 steps a day, that's associated with a 50 to 70% reduction in all-cause mortality. It doesn't have to be 10,000 steps a day. And it's cumulative. It's all throughout your day. So if you can work movement, work exercise into just your daily routines and not be sitting around for so many hours a day. In fact, research has shown that, you know, people who sit for 6 or 8 hours a day, that's actually worse predictor for your health outcomes than smoking. So you want to get up and move your body. And the other thing I like to tell people is you can take classes, get together with a friend. That community element is so important for helping to motivate and learn other things you can do and exchange ideas and just for enjoyment. So there are classes. There's Pilates you can take. I love a new type of exercise I'm doing now with my wife called P-Volve, which is functional training. And I do like functional training, things that move the body in 360 degrees and use the natural movements of the joints instead of restrictive movements that some exercises do. Gardening can also be wonderful. You're squatting, you're stretching, you're standing up, you're carrying things. All of that can be helpful. And if you really are starting from a place where you're feeling weak, you're not feeling that strong, you're not feeling motivated to necessarily go out of the house, well, you can even take a couple of soup cans and just sit there and do curls. The bottom line with exercise is it's time under tension. What does that mean? That means the amount of time that you're putting your muscles and creating tension in your muscles, that's where they're getting the exercise. Somebody could take a 25-pound dumbbell and do 5 or 10 reps, and they can be getting the exact same amount of stress on the muscle and exercise in the muscle. Somebody who takes a soup can, walks around for 20 minutes and does 100. And just keeps going until the fatigue sets in. Again, you can be creative. It's not a one size fits all. It is about finding out what's interesting to you, what sounds fun, and what you will consistently do, and understanding that it's not written in stone. You can always change.
Mm-hmm. And be creative. I love that. I was actually talking about that with my health coaching team the other day, how during the pandemic, people had to get creative with this and using like milk jugs and those cans, right, to do some resistance training. So thank you for bringing that back up again. Everything you just said regarding that is very helpful. And I think people really struggle with not getting to the gym or thinking they're not exercisers. They've never lifted a weight in their life. And you just listed so many ways to focus on natural and fun and social activities that are beneficial. Small and steady does win the race. I love to repeat that. Take the stairs when you can, park a little farther away. There are reasons for all of that because we do have too many sedentary hours. And so you may have the best diet in the world, but you're overlooking the fact that you're really sedentary. And that's something we know, as you mentioned, that sitting is the new smoking. It's really true, isn't it? So let's get out there and get people moving, and your own weight. Just to reiterate some of the things you say, your own weight when you're walking, that is weight bearing activity and helps build strength, right? So simple ways to get it in there. It's all good for those bones. And don't you consider the bones the largest organ in the body? I do. Some will say the skin, but I think it's our skeletal system.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, most people will say it in books. It says the skin is, but bones they're massive. I mean, I don't know how now that I think about it, I don't know how they're not.
Right. And as you were mentioning that about those cancer trials, like it's all tied together when you think of all of that activity that's going on inside of our bones. It isn't just about, as you said, putting in the minerals to our bones and the support structure. They're very active and there's so much going on in there. Like, I get excited about this because it's an area of our health that not enough people are talking about. And I know I personally, and you too, we want to be vital through age. And as we all age in society, if we can prevent falls simply through diet and lifestyle and preventing osteoporosis, but also reducing the number of fractures and falls, I mean, that's huge. That's right.
It is huge.
So there's a very important aspect of this that we didn't yet discuss. So I'm trying to touch on the diet, the exercise, and the supplements. And we covered all of those. And I do want to hear from you about medications and some things. Many people take a lot of medications on a daily basis. Any specific medications that people need to be aware of or thinking about? There's a cost benefit analysis of all medications. So fill us in on what could be really potentially dangerous for our bones over time.
This is an issue that people really need to educate themselves about because most clinicians are not aware of this. And so that there's a whole chapter in my book, and it's called Check Your Medicine Cabinet, that chapter in my book, looking at all of these, medications. And there are even more that I don't list in there that it's become known that are causing bone damage, weakening bones, and increasing fracture risk. So I'll mention a few of the most commonly prescribed drugs, but there's a long list. So prednisone, and about 1% of the population is on chronic glucocorticoid or prednisone treatment. It's used for autoimmune diseases, asthma, COPD. It's a powerful anti-inflammatory. It was discovered in the 1940s. It was called compound E at the time. And it was a miracle drug. And it is a miracle drug. It is incredible at just squashing inflammation and modulating the immune system. The discoverers of compound E, of this glucocorticoids, actually won the Nobel Prize. But what they found out when patients started dying who were taking this medication is that their bones, and this is a quote from the research, their bones, quote, cut like butter. It is so damaging to bone that people who are on these chronic glucocorticoids like prednisone, that 30 to 50% of them will break a bone. That's how damaging it is. Fortunately, there are clinical trials with MK4 in both adults and children showing that it stops the bone loss by that medication. And in fact, that research and the other research in people with postmenopausal osteoporosis, the research on the MK4, looking to help my patients, and I was looking for that clinical dose of the nutrient at the time. This is back in 2005, 2006, and it didn't exist in any dietary supplements. So that's why I created my supplement company, to create the solution that I needed for my patients. And still today, my products, OsteoK and OsteoK Minis, are the only ones on the market that have that clinical dose of MK4 with the calcium and the vitamin D shown in clinical trials to maintain strong bones and promote healthy bone density. So with the glucocorticoids, if you're able to reduce that dose, or even better, come off of it, people who stop prednisone, for example, what we know is their bone health does improve. And so that's a good thing. It'll just naturally get better. But a lot of times people who are on them will end up staying on them long term. And so there are ways that you can help mitigate or reduce that risk of the bone loss again by taking, at least what the research shows in the clinical trials, that 45 milligrams of MK4. With respect to other medications, other really common medications, 94% of patients, elderly, 65 years and older, are on a medication that increases their risk for falling. So they're typically prescribed for insomnia. They're the benzodiazepines or the benzo-like drugs like Ambien, for example. And that decreases somebody's balance and increases their risk for falling. So if you're taking that for insomnia or anxiety, if there's another way to deal with that doesn't increase that risk for falling, that's a good strategy. Antidepressants, specifically any antidepressant medication that artificially increases serotonin. There are serotonin receptors in bone. There are melatonin receptors in bone. There are angiotensin receptors in bone, which is involved in blood pressure regulation. There's lots of different interactions with the bone and the rest of the body. And what happens is when you're artificially increasing the amount of serotonin in your body by taking these medications like Prozac and Wellbutrin and other medications in those categories, you are increasing the rate or how fast bone is destroyed. You're increasing the activity of osteoclasts. Osteoclasts are the type of cell in bone that breaks old, worn out bone down. It breaks it down to recycle it. And osteoblasts are the cells that build up new healthy bone. And that's a process called bone remodeling. Having that in balance with old bone being broken down and new healthy bone being created, that's what you need to maintain healthy bones and even grow stronger bones. But when it's out of balance, and essentially osteoporosis is a disease of imbalance where the destructive forces are winning, and these medications like these antidepressants are increasing the destructive forces. They're decreasing how fast bone is broken down. So much so that meta-analyses have been conducted on people taking these medications. And they concluded that if you take it for 1 to 5 years, women specifically taking it for 1 to 5 years, for every 19 women taking an SSRI, we will expect one of them to break a bone. And yet most doctors are totally unaware of that. Now, there are integrative, functional, naturopathic ways to deal with depression and anxiety. Talk to your doctors about that. That may be an effective way to help you wean off of these medications or reduce the dose. The other medication that's so common, in fact, it's over the counter now. People are taking it for years and years, although it was never approved for chronic use, are the acid blocking medications, specifically the proton pump inhibitors. The first US FDA warning letter to doctors and to pharmaceutical companies that this category of medications destroys bone, the first letter was in 2010. This is not new information. What we know now is that people that are on these acid blocking medications for chronically, if you're taking it for 4 years consistently, that's associated with a 60% increased risk of hip fracture. Now, it's not just that at 4 years, it goes from 0 risk all the way up to 60. It's increasing over time and increasing your risk for fractures. Now, 50% of those medications are prescribed for just one condition, acid reflux. And in fact, when somebody is taking an acid blocker, a proton pump inhibitor for acid reflux, their risk for fractures is even higher than people who are taking the medication for other reasons. Now, doctors also typically, what happens in medicine is there's a medication that's used for a disease that's caused by one thing, and doctors see the disease in a different situation and they just use the same medication. Let me give you an example. The FDA approved medications for osteoporosis, the clinical trials were done on postmenopausal osteoporosis. So oral bisphosphonates like Fosamax, that sort of thing. For years, doctors said, oh, well, you've got now medication-induced osteoporosis caused by these acid-blocking medications. Let me just give you oral bisphosphonate. Let me give you Fosamax because, well, that's what we do over here with these other patients. Then they decided to study it. And what they found is there have been multiple clinical trials, and they show that people who take a proton pump inhibitor and then they're given also a bisphosphonate medication to take, their risk of fractures is even higher than people who are only taking the acid blocking medication. The osteoporosis medication increased their risk for fractures. So I go through that in my book and I give you questions to ask your doctor to make sure that you're actually getting the best advice possible so you can make the best decisions for your health. And there are other medications too. There's, the Parkinson's disease medication, levodopa, carbidopa. There's anti-seizure medication like phenytoin that increases osteoporosis risk and fractures. Aromatase inhibitors used for breast cancer. For every 20 women taking an aromatase inhibitor for 5 years, we'll expect one of them to break a bone. And most women with breast cancer, especially estrogen receptor positive breast cancer, are going to be on long-term aromatase inhibitor therapy. So it's really important to understand those risks and to mitigate those risks.
I want to replay all of that for people to have that sink in and digest all of what you just said. You've shed so much light on so many areas of this, and I'm thrilled to be talking about this. Again, I'm here to empower people, and this is just your wealth of information about this very, very pressing issue and in our aging population and society globally. So thank you, John. I could literally keep you here all day talking about so many aspects of this and lifestyle and helping people. Are there any other key takeaways you want to give to listeners?
Yes. What I'd like to say is, if people come to me with their bone density test results, and it is anxiety producing, no doubt about it. People are scared. And oftentimes when they've been given those test results and they've gone to their physician, their doctors, presented them with the results, talked to them about the results, they are told immediately that they need to start a medication right away. And oftentimes I've had patients even tell me that their physician who was talking to them, they felt pressured to start the medication. And I just want to tell people, when they come to me, first of all, I have them take a deep breath. Let's take a deep breath. I put the bone density test in its proper context, like I did earlier in this interview, that it is not the most important thing when it comes to predicting fracture risk in patients. And I let them know that, look, there is time for you to educate yourself and create a holistic plan that makes sense for you to improve your bone health and reduce your fracture risk. Yes, medications may be a part of that, but they may not be. Ultimately, it's up to you as the patient to decide and gather the information, enough information where you feel comfortable deciding which is the best pathway for you to go down. And that's why I wrote the book, Fracture Proof Your Bones. I hope it's doing a great service for people out there and helping them to take more charge of their bone health and understand what they can do and questions they can ask their doctor so they get the best care possible.
Mm-hmm. Fabulous. You took many words right out of my mouth. I work to remove the fear factor in people. And I think just starting right there, taking the deep breath and saying, we can create a plan to help improve the situation really helps people. So thank you. That was fantastic. I have to tell you, I actually downloaded it on Audible, your book, and started it last night, and I couldn't put it down. I had to because I did need sleep. Even that, I didn't bring that up because there's so much time, but sleep deprivation can put us more at risk for falling. And if you're somebody with osteopenia or osteoporosis, right, leads to those fractures. So there's so many facets of our lifestyle. And this is, again, why this topic is so important. But you just shared so much knowledge with all of us. I've absolutely loved this conversation. I would really like to do a follow-up with you at some point. For today, I just want to thank you for being here and ask you two final questions, actually. I have one question that I ask all of my guests, John, and that is, what is one thing you're grateful for today?
I would love to do a follow-up with you. I am so passionate about this issue and helping people understand what they can do proactively that, yes, I would love to. In terms of what I am grateful for today, I woke up this morning, I had my cup of coffee, went in my backyard, and I am very grateful for just the peace and quiet and my family, and that I'm doing meaningful work that is important to me, that I'm blessed to be able to do and make a living at something that I'm passionate about and absolutely love, and the ability to come on your podcast and share what I've learned. I am deeply grateful for this opportunity.
Thank you. Every time I do this, it reminds me how grateful I am that I have this opportunity to meet people like you and share all of this knowledge to educate the population, right? To truly live healthier, longer. So thank you. I'm extremely grateful as well. And I bet you're grateful to be waking up in Southern California instead of Montana. You and I were talking at the beginning. It was funny how cold Montana is and beautiful, but now you're in, this beautiful sunny place. So I can appreciate that as well. When the sun is shining and you have your health. And for me, that great first cup of coffee in the morning.
Wonderful ritual.
Right, exactly. So finally, my very final question for you today, John, is where can listeners find you and your book, and what do you want to share about how to reach you?
The best place to get information and find me is on my website, nbihealth.com. NBI stands for Nutritional Biochemistry Incorporated. The website is nbihealth.com. You can reach me through the website. The book is available on the website, also on Amazon. But there are tons of free informational resources, articles that I've written that you can read. My products are available there as well for you to look at and evaluate the research and see if they'd be a good fit for you as well.
Fantastic. Thank you for all the work you do and for your mission in helping people. And also, please do, for listeners, check out NBI, his website, and even, all the research that has gone into developing your product, OsteoK. It's tremendous. So thank you again for being here. And till the next time. Thank you for taking time to join me and listen to this episode. You can find more information and subscribe to the Sense of Wellness podcast on our website at ccphp.net/sens. This show is brought to you by Castle Connolly Private Health Partners, a concierge medicine organization that partners with and supports exceptional physicians to deliver an unrivaled experience of comprehensive, collaborative, and attentive care for a preventative approach on health and optimal well-being for members. Be sure to listen in next time to the Sense of Wellness podcast, and remember, simple daily habits matter most.